Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you in part by our lovely sponsor, Heavenly Spirits. Check them out. They've got a really great line of imported French whiskeys, and you'd be surprised. I think the Scotch learned how to make Scotch from the French, but that we should do a show on that. And also, this particular podcast is under the auspices of a grant from Mass Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, which is their local agent. So without any further ado, that's always been, what is it? Ado. Can you have more than one ado? But anyway, I'll let our guests introduce themselves. They're a returning guest, and they're going to talk to us about another master painter in who's a Fairhaven native. Without pausing anymore, go right ahead, guest, introduce yourself and spell your name.
Great. So, and explain my name. Okay.
Did I say explain? Did I say spell?
You said explain. All right.
Okay.
Well, it goes back. My name is Kyle DeCicco-Carey. That's Kyle DE capital CICCO hyphen capital CAREY. And as always, the hyphen silent. I'm the director of the Millicent Library in Fairhaven. I've been here since October 2020. I studied history at Ohio State in UMass Dartmouth and I received a graduate degree in library and information science from Simmons University. I'm a certified archivist through the Academy of Certified Archivists. I'm also certified as a digital archive specialist from the Society of American Archivists. In my spare time, I'm the president of the board of the Mattapoisett Museum. I do live in Mattapoisett, just over the line from Fairhaven, with my wife, Jessica, my daughter, Alice, who just started college, and my son, Archer, who is halfway through third grade. I also have 9 chickens, a corgi, and a cat named Freddie Percury. So that's it. That's my life.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Archer, how similar it is with my my grandchildren. Archer must have been an oops baby, I'm assuming, because my grandchildren are 7 years apart, and it was like, oops.
Yep. But we're happy to have him. We were happy.
Yes.
With that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's a typical little boy and keeps us laughing. And
yeah, you know what? You won't get the emptiness syndrome for quite a while.
I know it.
So who are you going to talk to us about this time? You've done Lemuel Eldred, and we've done William Bradford, who are practically connected at the hip. And today is going to be who?
It's going to be Robert Swain Gifford, who I believe knew both of those guys. Let's see how he could not. They were all artists around the same time. So let me start with the beginning with he's also, you'll see him a lot as R. Swain Gifford. I'll refer to him as Robert. So he was born in 1841 on Mattapoisett Island. His father worked for a guy named William Swain, who was part owner of most of the Elizabeth Islands. The other owner was John Murray Forbes, which is the Forbes family, and apparently they still own most of the islands there. At some point, probably not long after Robert was born, William sold his ownership to the island to the Forbes family. And of course, William Swain, some people may recognize the name Swain. William Swain would go on to bequeath his estate to start a school, which started as the Swain Free School in 1881, then became the Swain School of Design in 1902. In 1988, the school merged with the College of Visual and Performing Arts at Southeastern Massachusetts University, which is now UMass Dartmouth. Little there's all these like little interesting historical footnotes, in these stories. So baby Robert was born in I think 1841. The Swains, which is William and Lydia Swain, they had an older son who was sick most of his life with a bone disease. I believe he was out of college by the time he's a young man by the time young Robert was born. So the Swain son name was Robert. So the Giffords named their son Robert Swain out of respect for the Swain family. And the Swain Robert passed away in 1844. So the naming of the baby really touched the Swains. And Lydia Swain took an interest in Gifford as he got older. He helped him out with his education, or whether she helped him out with his education, and she introduced him to certain people to get connections for him, and really helped him out later in life. It's interesting because I was reading about his father, the family, and it seemed like they really didn't have a lot of money. But I'm thinking, well, how he owned part of this island, but then his father, like, there's just something isn't right about the story, because then he left. But from what I read, his father worked on farms as laborers and shipyards, which inspired Robert to sketch nautical scenes. But I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But maybe that's what he did. It was the mid 1800s. Robert, he had 10 siblings altogether, but 10 died in childhood, and it sounds like Robert may have been, I guess, a sickly child. I didn't really come across him like having any illnesses or anything when he was a child, but everything I read suggested that he was maybe smaller than the average child. But so it's not clear when he started sketching or what drew him to art. His art later in life would consist mainly of etchings, oil paintings, watercolors. His art was influenced by I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, Barbizon school. No,
The Barbizon School.
Barbizon school.
Barbizon School, yep.
Right, which was a mid-19th century French art movement that focused on painting landscape in realistic terms. And it comes, the name comes, it's not like a real school, it's more of
a group of like-minded painters.
Right, yeah, which there was a name of a city name or a town name near Paris, where many of the artists of that style kind of came together in their own little community. So around
I'm blanking out, but I think the leader of the band was a Rousseau, I believe, or close to it. It's been a while since I taught art history. It's like if you don't fix that carburetor every day, you're not a carburetor mechanic. So.
Right. Well, I was just reading over my notes yesterday, and I could have told you when I was looking at those notes yesterday, but it's gone today.
Yeah.
So around 1854, he met Albert or Albertus van Beest, and I think I may have mentioned him on a earlier podcast, but he was a Dutch maritime artist. At one point, he was appointed as the official artist of the Royal Dutch Fleet. Prince Henry of the Netherlands had him go on a voyage as his personal artist to the Far East, and so the guy had been around. So where does he go from there? He came to New Bedford, and he was in New Bedford pretty much, I think, through the 1850s or so, because I believe Bradford, he knew William Bradford and others, but so at some point Gifford meets him, and Van Beest is impressed with the sketches, and he takes him on as an assistant, and they also are said to have collaborated on some works as well. So Gifford also met William Bradford and studied under him, although I don't think like Eldred had actually gone down to New York and stayed with Bradford for a while, but I don't think that was the case with Gifford.
Didn't they all have a connection to the Arctic? I mean, they were all down there at some point in time, either together or individually.
Yeah, so he had it. From what I understand, Gifford had gone down with Van Viest to New York, but he really wasn't doing well, so he came back to New Bedford. But later he would go back down, and it sounds like that it was the art community down there. So he had trouble establishing himself in New York, so he came back to New Bedford, and he shared a studio space with a friend, Walter Ricketson, who was a sculptor. He would do well. He sculpted busts of Emerson, of Thoreau, and Louisa May Alcott, and others. So I'm not clear how they, because I don't think, Ricketson was from New Bedford because his father was Daniel Ricketson. He's the historian.
Daniel Ricketson, who was a transcendentalist, who was a friend of Henry David Thoreau, who Carl Simmons, the erstwhile historian, an amazing young guy with so much in his head. His thing is the shanty at Brooklawn Park in the north end of the city, where I still remember seeing the shanty as a kid. It was up there for years. So this was also another existential, transcendental hotspot in the United States.
So they were friends, and in 1863 the two went camping in the Adirondacks. Gifford did several sketches and pencils and oils, waterfalls and things like that, and then they went up to an island up near New Brunswick, and he did some more landscape work there. So in 1864, decided he was going to go to Boston, open a studio, and he was doing much better. He was selling paintings. He was getting involved in social life there. He was going to operas and dinner parties and concerts. And then in 1866 is when he went back down to New York and opened a studio. He was, because he was doing more better at that point. He was meeting other artists. He was getting more exposure there, and that's the place where artists went to get, to really try to make it and get the exposure that they needed. He shared a studio with a guy named Samuel Coleman. He had exhibited work in Paris, London, the MFA in Boston. And the studio was located at the Dodworth Building on Fifth Avenue. In 1872, the Dodworth Building was actually the first location of the Met when they started, and it's kind of funny because the Met was founded in 1870, but at the time didn't have a home or a collection at the time. But they were just, hey, let's get together and just. Well, they had an idea, I guess, and it worked out pretty well. So the following year, he submitted 3 paintings. They were maritime paintings to the National Academy of Design in New York, which led him to be elected as an associate member there. His friend Coleman, or had he shared the studio space with, had been trying to get him elected to the Academy, but the Academy didn't want anything to do with him. They just didn't think it was worth it. But apparently, after seeing these submissions, they changed their mind. And then Gifford would later serve on the Academy Council in the 1880s, and then again just before he passed away in 1905. So he's like a lot of I think like Eldred and Bradford, they all start traveling, seeing the world. In 1869, he went out to California and Oregon, working on, obviously there's different landscapes out there than here on the New England coast. And then he went to England and France and Italy, Spain, Egypt, and a bunch of other places. He did works there. He returned and exhibited around 1873 is when he started exhibiting these works. And he was becoming more and more known if he wasn't already at that point. So So he was doing pretty well. In 1874, he married a woman named Frances Eliot, who was a New Bedford girl. Her father was Thomas Dawes Eliot. He had practiced law in New Bedford. I think he was originally from Boston, came down to practice law in New Bedford. And he also served in the U.S. House of Representatives through the 1859 to 1869. So he was there for the country was split apart and during the Civil War. And so just after marrying, he went back overseas, and he did the Egyptian caravan, which many people kind of know and associate with Gifford. He won awards for that. He submitted his work, Cedars of New England, at the Paris exhibition of 1878. But he did have his critics. So I was reading about the Paris exhibition at the time. A critic said, it's an excellent motive showing feeling for effect. More serious study and attempt at realization would have resulted in a valuable picture.
So the academicians were still hung up on that. It's the same thing that the French were dealing with the Impressionist school and all the other schools that followed afterwards. So the snobs, basically, the snob factor.
Yeah,
Now,
they didn't like how things were changing.
I think there's one or two pieces of his, but there are one or two pieces, I believe. It may have been the writer show, the Albert Pinkham writer show at the Whaling Museum last year. And there may be a couple of more as well from either Gifford, our Swain Gifford, or a couple of other people. But it seemed like what's amazing to me is the connectivity of these artists to one another. I was doing a podcast with Naomi Slip, the Crocker Endowed Chair, the curator at the New Bedford Museum. And I said, is it just me, or does it seem that at one point in time, all roads led to New Bedford? Anybody that was anybody showed up or was born in New Bedford. It's just an absolute amazing thing. And the other thing is their mobility. I mean, not that, you couldn't get anywhere on a sailboat, a steamboat, or horse and wagon or a train, but it's still amazing, their mobility. I mean, you're an artist who's, doing relatively well, but you're traveling all over the place, and that costs money. But darn, it's like watching a, Indiana Jones movie,
Right. Yeah, I wonder about that because it's, I'm like, wow, especially the 1860s, like you hear about the Oregon Trail and, we're all dying of dysentery on the way there, but these guys are just going out to paint,
Yeah. And they're going to Florence, they're going to Venice, they're going to Paris.
Yeah. But was it just not that expensive to travel there? I mean, obviously it took a lot longer, but
I wonder,
if you're down in steerage and I don't know where they're, it's like stay out the Titanic, it'll lock you down there. But, yeah, no, that is fascinating. And I mean, with New Bedford being, kind of the whaling capital, and it's, we still have the whale oil production going there. Was that for some reason a draw? I mean, at least for the New England folks, before they went down to New York, up to Boston. Like it seems like then I've seen this with other artists. Like, well, if I can make it in New Bedford, I can make it in Boston. If I can make it in Boston, I can do it in New York. And they kind of like followed that. And then out west and overseas. Yeah, it's fascinating. But I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I would love to study this. I would love to when one of the interesting things here is like, as I'm reading, I'm like, well, how did these guys know each other? I'm like, yeah, I mean, Fairhaven, small town and stuff, but it's still relatively small town now, but you don't know everybody. But I guess if you're running in certain circles and, you're an artist, you tend to meet other people that's doing what you're doing. And
yeah, it's probably like that. Social strata was more apparent back then than it is now. You kind of knew your place. I hate to use that term,
right.
and you hung out with people that, belong to the same place that you're supposed to stay in,
Right.
Of course, you could be a social climber and get especially as an artist, you can come from humble beginnings and then become celebrated and move your way up the ranks,
Right.
So the whole social thing there was probably a little bit more dog eats dog than it actually is now. So
Yeah. But again, I was going back to his father, and his relationship with the Fords or the Forbes, and the fact that he left all this money to start a school, but he was working as like a laborer, and I'm like, wait a minute, did they have wealth and connections or not? Like, were they, and I don't know exactly what his father did. I've just seen like census records and things like that, and other things that have been written about him.
There were two market crashes, one in the late 1830s, and I think one was in 39 and one was in 49, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And speaking of 49, it's amazing. I don't think anybody's ever done any studies on it, but there were an enormous amount of people who left the city to go out to the gold fields.
Right. Yeah.
Where Converse, this is so New England, where Converse Photo used to be. I have no idea what's there now. It's behind the, it's to the left of the Dunkin' Donuts on the corner of Market and Union. That building was built by John H.W. Page. I believe he was an attorney, but he went out to the gold fields, and because he had an education, they made him a mine engineer.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, no, I had a similar thing. I had a similar thing at another job where it's like, you went to college, didn't you? Yeah. Oh, good. You're a safety manager. What?
Yeah.
But anyway, he made out quite well, came back and built that building. And the unfortunate thing about J.H.W. Page was that I don't know if it was an economic downturn. I don't know if he had some behavioral, emotional issues. But I think it was in Mattapan. He went out on the beach, filled his pockets with rocks, and walked into the surf and drowned himself.
Right.
So I don't know if that name ever pops up in any of your research, but I think about him every so often. It's pretty tragic.
Yeah,
case.
I think I've heard that story, I've read that story, and I think that was typical of people. If they were a financial failure, they were just a failure, and why keep going?
Because I mean, how else could you, unless the Forbes gave him the shaft? Because it's funny, every time you go to the islands, when they're doing the announcements, you're going through Woods Hole or whatever, and it's like, oh, and if you look over there, that 17th century house, that's the homestead of Malcolm Forbes. Everybody, ooh,
Wow.
and they didn't know that
Fancy.
there was a connection, which is, I guess it has its coolness to it,
Yeah. Well, the Swains, like Lydia Swain and Robert Gifford, they stayed in touch. They throughout. The Whaling Museum actually has Robert Swain Gifford's papers there, and letters, and they do have letters there between him and Lydia Swain, which I would love to read. And he also has a couple journals there. So so they were staying in touch, it looks like, all along his career, at least through the from what the Whaling Museum has, at least to the in the 1870s, but I'm not sure when she passed away. But so he did have his critics. We have the library, we have an etching of his. It's called Coal Pockets in New Bedford, which he did in 1879. And I didn't know this, but a coal pocket is it's a facility for storing and loading coal for distribution. And I guess you would have those down by the water. And I know when I worked at Harvard University, they used to have the College Wharf was down on the Charles, and it was a big coal house down there. And it was just they would cart the coal up from the river. It probably smelled awful down there. But one of the critics at the time when he did that. Well, I mean, he got positive feedback on it. They said his work showed Gifford's ability to use light and shade, to teach us to see the beauty where our unguided eyes would have failed to discover it. But another critic called his etchings bald and bare. In the coal pockets in New Bedford, he said he used a literal method instead of the suggestive one, which belongs properly to modern etching, and the result is not happy.
There seems to be like quite a bias against him. I mean, I've seen his work, and it's
Yeah. Well,
it's,
I think because it was more towards realism, in there was like, this is kind of like that period where you had the what's the school that Bradford was part of when they were doing like
the luminous.
well,
I
yeah,
believe he was,
yeah, luminous and doing realistic looking landscapes.
There's a Hudson River School at
Hudson
that
River
time.
School, right?
Right.
And there were,
I think Coleman was a part of the Hudson River School as well.
Yeah.
And there was this whole thing too about the America was relatively new. And even though photography was around, it really didn't get cranking until the Civil War with Brady and the other guy who never anybody ever remembers. Case in point. But they would go out to the Adirondacks or the Hudson River Valley, great swaths of open land. The same thing going out to the Southwest into the canyons and such. And so there was this like thing that they were, even going to the Arctic, they were painting things that your average person probably would never have the opportunity to see in person. And I guess they were hanging their hat on that subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean,
and there's the whole thing about this almost a Gaia principle where there was almost I don't want to say a religious backlash against conventional religion, but where nature was the presence of God, the great cathedral of the outdoor.
Right.
Outdoors. Yeah. Where did he live in Fairhaven?
That's a good question. I don't know. I didn't start. So I've been, I don't know. Like I couldn't find exactly where it was that he lived. In one thing I read said he went to school in New Bedford. So I don't know. I would think he would have gone to school in Fairhaven, but maybe he lived closer to the New Bedford side. I don't know. I wasn't able to. I mean, I didn't dig too deep into it, just because I just go down these rabbit holes. I'm like, well, who lived next to him, and who who did he borrow a cup of sugar from? Like,
and then you find things you weren't looking for that are way cooler than the things that you were looking for, and you get totally off track.
Yeah. Because when I first I knew a little bit about him, I did. Yeah, but then I was like, well, he doesn't seem like much different than Eldred, and he's just like, where's this going? But a lot of the same, there's parallels between them. But then, Gifford actually went on to teach. At some point, he started teaching. I'm not sure when, but by 1878, he was teaching at the Cooper Union School in New York, and that's still there. It's a small private college. I don't know much about it.
The fabled Cooper Union.
The fabled, yeah. And I guess that actually started as with the idea that everyone's entitled to education. Like, this is
the free school movement, right? I mean, school was higher education. There were free schools that were supported by industrialists or.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Harvard College, when that was funded by the government. I don't think it was maybe in the 1830s or 40s that it went to the college itself. The government stopped funding it, or but yeah, there was, and the whole educational system was kind of coming together around this time too. So this whole idea of like, let's educate.
What was the most jaw-dropping? Hope you have one, because I'd be putting you on a spot. What's the most jaw-dropping fact, or I'll be darned fact, or laugh out loud fact that you ran across with R. Swain Gifford?
Well, I guess I can jump to, I mean, I was going to cover that, but
Okay.
if you want to wait, or I can tell you about it
Yeah,
now.
I can wait. I can wait. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to get you off track. I don't want you
Well,
to go down a rabbit
no,
hole.
I mean, no, but this is how I found out about it. I went down
Okay.
this rabbit hole. Yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, so we were talking about him teaching.
Right.
So he taught painting there, and I found this great interview. It was about art schools in New York, and he was interviewed about his teaching style, and he said that he would teach the technicalities, which I believe he was talking about the fundamentals, and he said that he does this even for the the students that are really talented. He just breaks it down, focuses on the technicalities, and he's like, as you're doing that, you can help them help themselves, which is, it's kind of, I've taken courses recently and stuff, and there's I don't know to the extent that he was doing that, but it was kind of like, all right, students, get together and teach yourself. Like that's kind of an approach that's taken.
Experiential.
Right. Yeah. And he says, after he's taught the technicalities, he says the success of the students doesn't depend on, things like theories of painting, but it's more based on the teacher's personality. He said that if the teacher's interested and earnest and can inspire interest and earnest, the student's success will be greatest, which I thought was, I mean, how many times have we all had mean teachers and we're just like, I don't care about this class, but we all have that like inspiring teacher, and it may not be our best subject. And I had a couple of those in school. So he was like, he did a lot of traveling, and, Bradford had gone to the Arctic and things like that. So he got his chance to do something similar. In 1890, there was a man named Edward Harriman. He was president of the Union Pacific Railroad. He went to the U.S. Biological Survey, and he proposed a scientific exploring expedition. He offered to completely fund it. He wanted to recruit the nation's leading scientists to make a thorough examination of Alaska and across the Bering Strait. And he told the chief of the U.S. Biological Survey that he could be in charge of selecting anybody he wanted. He's like, I'll pay for it. I'm going. You're in charge. And the guy's name, Merriam. I forget his first name, but that was the chief of the U.S. Biological Survey. So he jumped at the idea. He like, yeah, let's do this. But what the president of the Union Pacific Railroad was actually doing is considering the possibility of building a railroad around the world that would cross the Bering Strait through Alaska. But he pitched it as, we just got to explore this place. Like, it'd be great, wouldn't it? So they did. And I think there were 23 scientists that went along on this voyage. There was the George Bird Grinnell, who was the founder of the Audubon Society and the editor of Field and Stream. He had the nation's leading geologist there. William Healy Dahl, who he had explored Alaska previously. They brought him along. They brought John Muir along. They brought photographers along. This is like one of these, like Edward S. Curtis was the photographer that they brought, and I started reading about him. And so he evidently he was a wedding photographer, but it's not clear. So Curtis was photographing on Mount Rainier, and Merriam and some scientists were exploring. I don't know if he was with them or he just happened to be out there shooting and they were exploring, but he helped save them when they got stuck on this ice field. And then they were, afterwards, he was showing them his photographs and they were really impressed. So Merriam's like, hey, you need to go with us on this trip. Right. And so he did his photographs, and the expedition led him to do a project to go around the country and photograph Native Americans you know, for the next 30 years. That's what he did for over 30 years. And then, of course, Robert Swain Gifford was asked to go along too. So he did a lot of landscape oil paintings. They used his you know, they copied his paintings for use in publications about the trip. And the Smithsonian, I believe, has a large collection of his works from this trip. So by then, this is kind of the end of his life. He dies in New York in 1905. Now the story that I want to get into is that he didn't stop painting after that. And I know I'm not making this up.
He didn't stop painting after he died.
He didn't stop painting after.
That's my dream.
I'm not making this up. It's probably not true.
More like
that's where my money is on that.
This is good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I was like, you gotta be. This is a story on itself. I'm like, I want to look into this more. But so in 1908, this is 3 years after Gifford died, there was a man named Frederick L. Thompson who claimed to be under the control of Gifford's spirit, forcing him to paint. So Thompson, he went to Professor James Hislop of the American Society for Psychical Research, which is a group that investigates psychic phenomenon. Thompson claimed he had met Gifford once in his life. He happened to run into Gifford when him and some buddies were out on a hunting trip, and Gifford was doing some sketches in nature. And Thompson said sometime in the summer or fall of 1905, Gifford had died in January of 1905. Thompson said that he was seized with an impulse to sketch and paint, and he claimed he never had training in it. He had actually worked as a goldsmith, but he said he was having hallucinations and visions of like trees and landscapes, and Gifford would speak to him. So Hislop took him to a medium, because that was the thing you would do if someone's like claiming this stuff. You're like, well, let's go to this medium. And so apparently Gifford came out and spoke through Thompson, you know, and explained some stuff to them about why he was inhabiting it, like, you know, gave them details of what he had Thompson paint. And then he right there did some sketches for them. And one of the sketches was, it came during a vision that Thompson had of the Elizabeth Island. So apparently it was supposed to be a specific place over there. So Hislop took a look at the work. He went to Nashon Island to find the actual place, but he couldn't find it. So he came back later with Thompson. They still couldn't locate it. But while we're there, Thompson went into a trance, right? Of course, Gifford's like, well, I got to show these guys. And so he told the professor through Thompson the place they were looking for, and they found it, right? And it looked pretty close to what he had painted. Thompson claimed never to have been there before, but this was enough to convince the professor to do a study, like an all-out study. He's like, oh, this looks pretty real, right? So this guy's definitely possessed. So Thompson claimed that, I thought this was funny. So he was also painting faces, mostly of women, like women and babies. And he said, you know, he never uses models. He says they come to him in visions. And the women he said the women he's painted are, quote, not the face of my wife nor any other type that I like best in the female beauty. All right. So, and a psychologist, he talked to psychologists, and they told him that he believes that in the spirit world, Gifford has become a woman, and that's who he was seeing. So there's
wow, this would make such an incredible screenplay.
Wouldn't it? And it was real.
Or live stage. I mean, you know, it's just, and when you think of all the artists that this guy Thompson could have chosen, maybe he could have chosen somebody that wasn't picked on by the academicians so much. But then again, if his skill level wasn't all that high, maybe that was his fudge factor.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
but still, it's an amazing story, even if it's all hooey.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, I want to get into painting. How can I do, I can do this quick and dirty?
Well, and also in defense of the man, I've got a photograph of my late father-in-law, whom I have never met, but who my sister-in-law tells me we are like two peas in a pod. And she said, I would love to sit in and listen to the conversations that you would have had, because she
Right.
said, I'm assuming, he said, you two are so much alike. And I would be painting, and I felt like, it's like, no, not the green. Go with the red. Go with the red. No, I mean orange. Grab the orange. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I can't completely laugh at it. And of course, I don't want to be laughed at, because I kind of understand
Right.
of the possibilities. But
Right. No, my mother tells me, so when she was growing up, her family rented this duplex from this older couple, this man and this woman. And in growing up, like my mom told me, she's like, you remind me so much of Clarence. He was the man. She was like, you just, your personality's like him. You do similar things. And I mean, I didn't live there. I probably met him once or twice when I was a kid, little, but there is that, there's like, maybe it's just certain types of personalities that or we're possessed.
or we are sometimes sensitive enough without even really knowing it I always wondered if there was like parallel, universes,
Oh, yeah.
or where you cross the line
Mhm.
without knowing it. And you I don't know, it's interesting,
Oh,
it's an
yeah.
interesting topic, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, growing up, I was, comic books and the superhero, like they all got into the stuff like that. And,
Mhm.
the whole, living in a haunted house and,
Gaiman, Neil
Neil,
Gaiman,
Neil, Neil
uh,
Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman from American Gods.
Mhm.
I read that book. My friend Don Wilkinson, he's really into the superheroes and the whole nine yards as well. And he said, and I'm not like an expert, but the religions, not religion, but religions have always, fascinated me. And like a line from a John Prine song, I saw Allah and Buddha sitting at the Savior's feast, and up in the sky an Arabian rabbi fed Quaker oats to a priest. Pretty good, not bad. You can't complain, because actually all them gods are about the same. And so there's this thing, and the mythologies that we have, and even myths, a mythology within mythologies. And when I read Gaiman's American Gods, it was like, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced, that I pretty much know what he's going to do on the next page. It's just kind of a weird feeling that,
Right.
so I and it is thing, okay, what world are they in now? I guess it's possible. I mean, like, how many of us drive on, coming home from a long day, it's at night, wintertime. And I remember I would have to cross the Braga Bridge to get back to New Bedford. And I could actually, put my hand to the Bible, so to speak, and raise my other hand and say, I have no recall of crossing that bridge.
Exactly.
None
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, wait, where am I? Like,
How could you
no,
not
I've
know?
done that. I'm like,
Yeah.
did I miss
Yeah.
my exit? No, I've already taken that exit.
Yeah, that happened to me on the way to it was an art history lecture. I was up in Taunton, and all of a sudden I'm like, the heck am I doing on the expressway?
Right. Well,
I've got 5 minutes to get back to class.
yeah. And here's my my geek coming out. Star Trek Next Generation parallels with Worf when he was.
Yeah.
You ever see that? He was jumping through.
It's possible.
It's a theory.
totally possible. But this is really, really, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
Bradford, everybody's like, ooh, Lemuel Eldred. I think the problem with Eldred today is that most people only know him from his etchings and not much more. So they just think, oh, he's an etcher,
Right.
Either you're into etchings or not, printmaking. And it isn't until you start to see his work and then you see his associations and such. And yeah, they had adventures and everything, but this guy, it's such a great backstory. How are you going to beat this one? You got
I'm
you
not.
got,
I'm
good.
retiring after this. I don't know. But I mean, this wasn't really Gifford. I mean,
Yeah, you got two more to go after this guy.
yeah, I know. I'm gonna have to find more occult stuff
Yeah.
to go along.
Well, I didn't mean to stop you because
Oh, no.
I can
Yeah,
see why you wanted to stay in track because
yeah,
I'm like,
I
okay,
love
where's he
this
going
story.
with this?
Yeah, and no,
It
there's
really
so much
would be a
more.
great screenplay.
And yeah, I mean, I didn't even get in. I mean, after, so I mean, so this professor, he published a pamphlet um, called the Thompson case, and he concluded that one of these incidents on its own isn't, it's not enough, but he's like looking at each one and looking at his life, and in Gifford's life, it's like this proves it. This Gifford's painting through this guy, and so Thompson was selling his paintings, and at one point I found him in the papers as he's like I'm not sure he was called Dr. Thomas the painter, or Thompson the painter. So and I'm wondering, it's like I don't know anything about gold. He was a goldsmith or something. Is there chemicals involved in that may have affected him?
The only chemical I believe is nitric acid that I'm aware of.
Right. Or was he doing other
Um,
things, making other things? Maybe, I don't know, but
or mercury, like the
true,
Mad
yeah.
Hatter kind of thing. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's really good point. And the other thing is, in contemporary times, has anybody almost like a double-blind curation test looked at a Thompson piece, and looked at an R. Swain Gifford? I mean, just mix them up and put them up on the wall and say, okay,
What do
check
you
them
got?
out. Tell us all about them. Would the assumption be, oh, these are all Giffords, or would they see something? What was his name? Tom.
Thompson.
No. Tom. He was on 60 Minutes or one of those news shows.
Tom Brokaw?
No. He was the head of the Met. He's the
Oh.
guy who fell down crazy about an ancient sculpture. Tom Hoving.
I don't know.
Anyway, he put almost his career on it, not knowing he was putting and it turned out to be a huge fraud. And it's like, the problem is that sometimes your curatorial eye goes blind.
Right. Yeah.
You go on
yeah, no,
assumption, not on fact, that kind
Sure,
of thing.
yeah. Or people get like, oh, this is it, and they don't fully invest.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
this is the other part of the Rosetta Stone that fell off, and that's what the fraudsters, what the fakers are all betting on, is that it's human nature. People don't like unfinished business, you know what I mean? But it would be really a great thing.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, I gotta work.
Yeah.
There's all these things I find, and I just
No, in your research, I mean, was there any dandruff, so to speak, any flakes that came off of it? I mean, this one obviously was a massive chunk right here.
Right.
It kind of makes all other research from here on dull,
Yeah.
But was there any other weirdness to his life? I mean, you got the mystery of his dad. Now you've got this kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I didn't really, nothing stuck out.
Yeah.
There wasn't any, you always want to find those scandals, or I don't know why. It just makes it more interesting. Like, you got up, went to work, came home.
Yeah, I've got an uncle who was a Portuguese language newspaper publisher, and he was either the biggest shyster in the world or a victim of circumstance.
Right.
And I still don't really know. I have a suspicion that it could have been a little bit of both, maybe. I'll cut it up the middle, but he was going to expose a priest for doing what a priest wasn't supposed to be doing in 1946. And either he was shaking him down, and B, the brunt of the Catholic Church, the power of the Catholic Church came down, to wipe him out.
Right.
Or a C, we should say, instead of the shakedown. he was going to expose this priest for what he shouldn't have been doing. So it's actually those two scenarios. He was either shaking them down or going to expose them, but regardless of what the situation was, the power of the church came down on top of him, and that's why he ended up in New York. And that's why when my mother and I moved in with him in New York, that's why he was there. You know, it's just, if it wasn't for that, I don't know how, oddly enough, if it wasn't for that, I don't know how my life would have turned out, because he's the guy that exposed me to all the artwork.
There you go. So it worked out, right? It worked out for you.
Yeah. I mean, the connections are so, you know, for the longest time, you know, the motto of New Bedford is in lucem defundum, what is it, by the, I find the light, or I share the light, you know, and a lot of it based, it's not just on knowledge and philosophy and so on and so forth, but it also because of whale oil. And we had all this incredible stuff going on here. And then it seemed like, I don't know, post 1950s, we went to sleep.
Well, we lost, you know,
50 something years.
The whaling industry died, the textile industry moved south and then overseas, and no jobs, no, you know.
The Great White Flight, the influx of people who were looking for cheap rents because the vacuum was filled by slumlords.
Right. Yeah. Putting down interstates, cutting towns in half, cities in half. And it didn't help.
No, it didn't help at all. What else you got for us? We got a few more minutes left.
Just not much. I mean, Thompson, he, you know, like I said, he went on to sell his art. He and then in the 1930s, he was committed to Bridgewater State Hospital. He evidently he was charged and convicted. Well, because he had evidently tried to poison his wife and her suspected 90-year-old lover with poison candy. So
90-year-old.
Yeah,
this just gets better and better.
Right. So here's the thing: is after he got out, he sued her and this guy, saying they conspired to have him locked up, and he won $75,000 in damages,
which was huge back then.
Yeah, well, he's asking for $1 million. So
oh well,
he didn't quite get that much.
A little shortfall, but
you know, should he? You know, did he? Yeah, it's just when I read it. Oh yeah, so Bridgewater State Hospital. Okay. But then the court's like, yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe he didn't try to poison him. So yeah, I mean that's the conclusion of Gifford's life. And Thompson, you know, I thought it was really rude of him not to inhabit somebody else, keep the artwork going, but he didn't do it.
Well, you know what? Based on that alone, regardless of his competency as an artist, you got to wonder why we haven't heard more about him, because he's such a story to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, Bradford went out to the Arctic. You know, Lemuel Eldred did all these waterfront things. He also went out to the Arctic. You know,
what happened with Thompson's paintings? You know, are they still out there, or did they become collectibles? I don't know. You know, I didn't really dig that. I was trying to find them. There was I don't know if I found him. There was an artist with a kind of the same name. His middle name was Lewis, but this one was spelled differently. The birthday was kind of right.
So you saying that this Thompson guy sort of vanished from history?
I don't know.
Oh, you just haven't found him, right?
I mean, his artwork may still, people may be aware of it. I don't know. But,
and what was the name of the doctor?
It's Hyslop, James.
Yeah, James. Okay, and he was the because don't forget too, the spiritualist movement was really, really, really big. Seances, all that other stuff.
Yeah. Mary Lincoln Todd was.
Yes. Oh yeah, she was big time into that.
Or Mary Todd Lincoln.
Mary Todd. Yes, yeah. Mary Todd Lincoln. And it was the so spiritualist.
Yeah, you're gonna look into this, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. In fact, I'm gonna ask John Stetson, who's another Fairhaven resident, who really is well versed in all of that, because he's a mentalist. You know, he's America's foremost mentalist. I mean, they did a whole television series with a Australian guy or something with curly
Right.
hair that just looks like nothing like John. But it was a big hit, and I'm sure he's doing well from residuals.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I'm stuck on this now.
I know, I am too. It's like,
Well, that's great. Who are you going to give us next as we wrap this up?
I had my notes out because I had other possibilities. I think maybe Clement Nye Swift.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yes.
There's another gift for there's what's his
I
name?
think you also had BS on the list too, although he wasn't a native, he did reside here, right?
Right, yeah. So yeah, I need to go back and look at what I've got. But yeah, I mean there better be another ghost story.
Yeah, because boy, it's gonna be anticlimactic after this. So
Yeah.
well, this is the third one, so that's the pinnacle. So it'll
Right.
be, a denouement.
That's right.
or the other two. Great. Anything else as we wrap this up?
Not that I'm aware of.
I want to thank you so much for all the time you've
Oh,
spent
no,
on this.
thank
This
you.
has been
This is-
fascinating.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And wow, I mean, you could have like a symposium at the library. I mean, there's just so much manna,
Mhm.
to feed all the eggheads, who love this kind of thing, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Great. Well, Kyle DeCicco-Carey, the director of the Millicent Library, thank you so much for joining us. This was fantastic.
Thank
I'm
you.
really, I mean, I was looking forward to all of them, but this one was off the charts.
Well, maybe next
Uh,
time I'll just do this again.
Yeah, we'll just do a repeat. Yeah, nobody will know.
Yeah.
Just change all the names, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
with that in
you.
mind, folks, we want to thank the folks from Heavenly Spirits for being our sponsor, and also for the grant support from the Mass Cultural Council, and specifically their local agent, the Fairhaven Cultural Council. And with that in mind, goodbye. Thanks so much.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.